Hey, gang, it's me, Dr. Miles, coming to you from my little home office studio. Grab your coffee, settle in, because our community is watching a moment where they lost control and we finally saw real consequences. What just happened in the last 48 hours has changed everything about how protests around federal buildings are going to be handled, whether the media admits it or not. Because in Minneapolis, outside a federal building, a protest turned into something so absurd, so chaotic, and so revealing that you almost can't believe it's real. And here's the kicker. The moment law enforcement actually enforced the law, mass arrests, the narrative machine started scrambling. Why? What are they not telling you about what sparked this confrontation? And why are they terrified that Americans are seeing the raw footage instead of the spin? Stay with me, because the details are wild and the implications are even bigger. You all know by now that there's a pattern in modern American politics. On the left, the emotional temperature keeps getting cranked up. Emergency, crisis, democracy is ending, you're unsafe, the system is illegitimate. And then, conveniently, any behavior becomes justifiable as long as it's wrapped in the right slogans. But for regular people, working families, parents, small business owners, folks who just want to get to work and come home safe, this isn't abstract theory. It's about whether your city can function. It's about whether public space is governed by law or by mob impulse. It's about whether the federal government will protect its own facilities or let intimidation become normal. And Minneapolis is one of those flashpoint cities where this tension has been building for years. You've got residents who want order, and you've got activist networks who've learned that if you generate enough chaos, somebody with power will eventually cave because the loudest people get rewarded. So when I saw the phrase Battle of the Dildos tied to a federal building, yes, that's what it's being called, I immediately thought, okay, this is going to be another one of those moments where the press downplays the disorder, reframes the aggressors as victims, and pretends the public didn't see what it just saw. But this time, something different happened. This time, they didn't get to run the clock out. All right, here's the core story. Multiple clips circulating online describe what happened outside the Whipple Federal Building in Minneapolis as the so-called Battle of the Dildos, and the headline detail is simple: mass arrests. One of the most circulated uploads is titled Battle of the Dildos outside of Whipple Federal Building in Minneapolis, mass arrests, posted by Freedom News TV, sorry, Perndi, sa, Scootercaster. Source now, according to a widely shared post attributed to Scootercaster NY, the allegation is that protesters were throwing silicone dildos at cars and at law enforcement while officers attempted to clear the area. That post explicitly uses the phrase Battle of the Dildos and places it outside the Whipple Federal Building in Minneapolis, and you'll see the same framing echoed as the clip spreads across accounts. War Monitor also references the incident and repeats the claim about protesters throwing silicone dildos during the confrontation. Source. Now, let me be careful and precise here because we do credibility in our community. The videos and posts show the event being described this way, and we have multiple independent social clip sources repeating the same basic facts: location, confrontation, and arrests. But we're not going to invent details like exact arrest counts or charges unless an official statement confirms them. That said, what we can say is this: the enforcement posture changed from endless tolerance to nope, you're done. And that is the part that matters. And then right on cue, the propaganda reflex kicks in. Instead of a serious conversation about what it means to harass people outside a federal facility and escalate into projectiles, yes, even ridiculous projectiles, they want to reframe it as just protest. But here's what's really happening. The left's public theater protest culture is collapsing under its own ugliness because normal Americans are watching the footage and saying, wait, this is what you've been defending? This is what makes this so astonishing, and honestly, kind of poetic. The left has spent years trying to convince the country that chaos is compassion, that disorder is justice, that anything goes as long as it's aimed at the right target. But when you strip away the slogans and you look at the behavior, what do you see? You see a political subculture that has replaced persuasion with humiliation rituals. They don't want to win arguments. They want to make public life so uncomfortable that you self-censor. That's not activism. That's intimidation. And what happened outside the Whipple Federal Building is the perfect microcosm of this broader trajectory. Federal buildings represent authority, law, courts, enforcement, administration, and when protesters decide the rules don't apply there, what they're really testing is this: will the state enforce boundaries or will it retreat? This time, we saw boundaries. We saw what the Scootercaster clip explicitly frames as mass arrests. Source: now let's talk about the media angle, because that's where the hidden truth framing becomes undeniable. Why do you think so much of this story is traveling through raw video and social posts rather than clean front-page coverage with straightforward language? Because mainstream outlets hate stories where the protest visuals look indefensible and law enforcement appears justified and the public's instinct is, good, enforce the law. So what do? They minimize, they euphemize, they say clashes, they say tensions. They avoid describing the conduct plainly. But you and I both know when a right-leaning crowd does something even mildly disorderly, the language becomes immediate and absolute. Insurrection, threat, domestic extremism. The double standard is the point. And here's the scholarly populist piece I want you to take with you. In political science, there's a concept, state capacity, the ability of institutions to actually enforce rules consistently. When state capacity drops, you get fragmentation, you get parallel rule systems, you get anything goes zones. Cities that normalize disorder eventually pay for it. Economically, socially, morally, businesses leave, families leave, police quit, the tax base erodes, and then the same political class that tolerated the disorder says, we need more money and more power, when the real problem was their refusal to enforce norms in the first place. International comparison? Look at what happened in places like Argentina, where a public fed up with dysfunction swung hard toward order and reform politics. You don't have to agree with every policy to understand the underlying mechanism. When everyday life becomes unstable, people rally to whoever promises stability and follows through. That's the coalition shift we're watching here, even in small moments. The electorate is forming a new alignment. Working people, parents, small business owners, folks who are simply done with chaos being marketed as virtue. So when I say this is a conservative win, I'm not saying it because of the juvenile props or the sensational label. I'm saying it because enforcement signals a turning point. The era of no consequences is ending, because it has to. And Democrats know they're losing this cultural argument. That's why they're scrambling. That's why they're panicking. Because once the public internalizes the rules have to matter again, the entire progressive street politics model starts to implode. What this tells us is the political winds are shifting, quietly but permanently. The dam is breaking, and it's breaking because normal Americans are tired of being told to accept dysfunction as the new normal. Just like we saw in other law and order inflection points, where a city hits a saturation point and the public says, enough. We're watching the early stages of a broader awakening. People are waking up to the fact that you can't build a decent society on vibes and intimidation. You need standards, you need enforcement, you need consequences. And yes, mainstream media is often silent or strangely vague when enforcement happens against left-wing disorder, because it disrupts the moral storyline they've been selling for years. That's why raw footage is everything. That's why citizen video and independent clip outlets matter so much. Source: so take a breath. Because despite the chaos, the momentum is moving our way. The pendulum is swinging back towards sanity. And once that pendulum starts swinging, it doesn't stop because a few commentators don't like it. So here's the bottom line, gang. This is why we fight. This is why we refuse to be gaslit. Our community sees what's real, and we say it out loud, respectfully but unapologetically. They wanted another spectacle with zero consequences. Instead, they got enforcement, and now they're scrambling. If you want more breakdowns like this, hit subscribe, share this with one friend who's sick of the spin, and drop a comment. Do you think this marks a real shift toward law and order? I love you guys, God bless, and I'll see you in the next video.